to tell you a story. There was God and the man in the garden. And the man could eat of any tree. And he did. And I picture that the man ate with God and they had fellowship together. Because that's what meals are. They're fellowship meals. And I think it's highly significant that the breaking of fellowship at the tree of the knowledge of good and evil was not just picking the fruit and eating it, but I think it was eating it with the snake. Fellowship with the snake. But tonight I want to talk to you about a different meal, another meal. And this story is ignited by what I would argue would be a candidate for one of the most heartless verses in the Bible. Here's the background. Jacob, he has sons. 12 of them. One of them is his favored. You know this by the clothes that he wears. He wears a coat of many colors. Now in the biblical narrative, in the biblical period, both Old Testament and New Testament, clothes are not a style statement. They're a statement of status. And Joseph has a coat of many colors. He's the favored son of the favored wife. This does not endear him to his brothers. In Genesis 37, Joseph is searching for his brothers. He finds a stranger along the way, and the stranger says, I think I've seen your brothers. They're at a place called Dothan. And Joseph goes to Dothan. And indeed, his brothers are there. Now, I'll pick up the reading in Genesis 37 at the verse numbered 23. So when Joseph came to his brothers, they stripped him of his robe, the richly ornamented robe he was wearing. They ripped off his status, naked. And they took him and they threw him into the cistern. Now the cistern was empty. There was no water in it. And here's the most heartless verse in the Bible, at least a candidate. So they sat down to eat their meal. At Dothan. They took Joseph and they threw him into a hole, and as they were eating, Joseph's in that hole, empty of water, and I hear Joseph crying out, brothers, Reuben, Asher, Simeon, please, Simeon, come and help me. Judah, help, help. And they sat down to eat. They're having fellowship with one another. It's not enough that they ripped off his robe, the richly ornamented robe, stripped him of his status. But they threw him in a pit, and it's not enough that they threw him in a pit, but they had fellowship with one another, and the sound of his crying voice, and they ignored him. I remember when I shared this with my congregational family. The service that I shared with them, a communion service. Now here's the interesting thing. What does Dothan mean? Dothan means two pits, two wells. One of those wells that those brothers sat between contained their suffering, alienated, broken brother. And I asked my congregation, do we sit here and do we not hear the cries of our alienated, broken brother? Or do we sit beside the empty pit, the empty tomb? And do we hear the cries? I think, as the people of God, we live in Dothan. We live between two pits, two holes in the ground. One of them, people who are denied, robbed of their status, the least of these, who are crying, but I wonder if we have the ears to hear. And we live beside another pit, the empty tomb, where our risen Lord and Savior, who will take measure of our lives inasmuch as we've done it to the least of these, you've done it to me. When we sit down and we have our meal and Jesus is our host, I think it's his goal to eradicate one of the most heartless verses in the Bible. When brothers sit down and eat, and the sound of the cries of the broken and are unresponsive. But we as the people of God respond. I can't tell you how important meals are in the biblical narrative. Jesus says, "Come to my table and do this in remembrance of me."